All right. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Champagne. Welcome to Change Ready, an original series brought to you by Behind the Human and Melosi. It's a series where we are doing everything possible to future-proof your mind and thrive in an era of unprecedented change. Today, we're speaking with Chris, who's a former CEO and acclaimed author. You're an acclaimed author, acclaimed company culture expert, who consistently guides organizations to become recognized as best places to work. He's achieved 5-time recognition as the fastest growing company by Inc. magazine, as the #1 leadership speaker on culture, and author of 3 best-selling books. I knew it was in there, including The Power of Company Culture and Remote Work. Chris stands as a top 50 global thought leader. Plus, he's got some pretty kick-ass glasses. He's got awesome energy, and he's done some really great things in this world. Welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thanks so much for having me. Love your glasses, too.
Thank you. I'll take it. Before we jump into your work, and or more so your work and some of the topics that I suspect we'll cover, let's just strip away the titles, the bio, and all that, and start with the fundamental question that everyone gets on this show, 400 or so at this point, and that's just, who are you?
Yeah, that's like a really hard question to answer, I feel like, because I'm a lot of things, and it maybe depends on well, who am I at work and who am I at home and who am I, the guy, a stranger you might see at the beer garden or whatever, on Saturday or something.
Sure.
It feels like I'm a lot of different people at times, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but I think we kind of get into these personas of ourselves. And so certainly at work, I'm like this super curious, hyper-focused person on what makes people tick and how do we, deliver for people. And I think I'm extremely trying to help other people in a way that enriches work and enriches what we're trying to do as an organization.
Sure.
And at home, I'm a dad and a grandpa and an owner of a brand new puppy and a husband and all the normal boring stuff I think we all end up taking on at some point.
The boring stuff. I love it. I mean, it's like the bedrock of everything we do, essentially.
That's right.
So, well, what would you say intuitively, don't overthink about, what would you say the through line is for you, some of the fundamental characteristics of, and just a caveat, I'm well aware, and I'm going through this as well, who we are today can be and often is different, last week or definitely a year or 10 years ago and so forth. We're always evolving. So I'm asking this I'm just taking a timestamp from today, because I hope you'll come back on years down the road. The show's been around long enough where we've had many repeat guests. It's always fun to see the evolution of this question. So for today, though, what are some of those fundamental characteristics that you see floating through all of those big buckets of your life?
I'm an ideator. So, if someone doesn't know really what that word means, I'm good. What my kind of superpower is, if you give me 100 ideas, if we come back and say, what are the 100 things we could go do to go get more clients, or the 100 things we could do to make employees happy, or whatever, I'm really good at saying these two. Here's the 100, this one and this one. Those are really exciting. Those will work. We can go build on those. And the other 98 are stupid or suck and they need to go away. They're not. They're a waste of our time. And I don't know where I got that or why I'm good at that, but I've always been able to take a lot of data and a lot of information and kind of pinpoint what's important or pinpoint what might be actionable right now.
Sure.
And so it feels like, as I was telling you the answer, my first answer, it kind of clarified in my mind that that's who I am to everyone else in my life, is the person who's able to help them cut through the noise and ultimately decide on what are the couple things that might be worth an experiment here to see if they're going to help us get better and going to enact real change or reinforce what's working or whatever it may be.
Sure. I love it. And that is applicable across the board. I mean, I know you have three kids, right? I believe.
Yeah.
3 kids. I mean, I've got 2 young boys. There's no shortage of noise and physical noise, but then off also, parenting noise, I would say, and differences of opinion and perspectives and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's a valuable tool to just zoom out and, okay, no, these are the things that make the most sense right now. Which links well to, I really want to talk about change, obviously, in a minute with you. I suspect that's a superpower in that arena as well. But before we get there, Chris, I mean, I have to ask, this is just a little bit of research from your website. I'd love to know what it's like to run a music club and how that all started.
So yeah, I have a music club, but it's not my music club. I should back up. So years ago, I read a book. So I have a book club as well, and in our book club, we read The Art of Gathering, and it's one of my favorite books. And in this book, they talked about all these different ways people meet, and I realized it was like some fundamental things that I was doing wrong in how I was bringing people together to have a good meeting, a good party, a good discussion, whatever that was. And well, I was doing a lot of things right, but there was definitely some things I needed to change. And in our book club was a woman who's been a friend of mine for years. And she said, my parents have a music club. I'm like, oh, that's really cool because I like music and I've been in bands. And she goes, but they've been doing it for like 36 years. And when I heard that, my mind was blown. And I said, you have to give me an invite. You have to get me there. And she was like, they're in their 70s, right? Like, she's like, this is classical and jazz. And like, it's very, and I go, no, I need to go. I don't care if they're listening to like the worst music ever. I want to know what makes them tick. Why have this group of people continue to meet every month for 36 years about music?
Wow.
About any topic, really. And so it took a year and she finally got me in because she had to like get me in when her parents were hosting because they rotate who's hosting.
Okay, yeah.
And I go in and I experience music club and it was awesome. And I picked up some really cool things about what made them successful in meeting. And then they said to me, and I went alone because my wife was like, listen, buddy, I'm not hanging. I'm no.
You're
like,
on your own experiment here.
She's a hard one. And I went and they were like, we hope you'll come back next month and bring your bride with you, your lovely bride with you. And I was like, I was so happy being there. I enjoyed it so much and I learned so much. And this is going to sound somewhat snobby and I don't mean it to be, but like, I think I could have also told you in that first question that I'm a learner. I love to learn. And there's some part of me that's like, if I'm a learner, shouldn't I be sitting around talking with other people who like to learn new things? Should I have been born like sitting in a salon in France or like during that time of like, if you ever watched that movie Midnight in Paris, like, shouldn't I have been in those things where I'm hanging out with these painters and writers and thinkers? And like, if I think I'm that person, shouldn't I be doing that thing? And I wasn't doing that thing at that time in my life. And I felt like this group was that thing. Sure. Where here's these smart people, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're professors, and they come together to talk about these crazy nuances of music.
Wow.
And so they asked me back. I talked my wife into coming. And the topic was, and you probably didn't expect this long of an answer, but I just find this fascinating. The topic was play music that represents an instrument you wish you would have learned as a child. What a really cool prompt and what a really cool way. Yeah. And so they all played classical music and jazz. And my wife showed up and played Def Leppard because she wished she would have been a drummer. And so she played Def Leppard because the cool story, the guy's got one arm now. He had a car wreck and he's still a drummer. And it's a really interesting story. And she did it to get kicked out. She wanted this to be the one time she went to music club. And then they were like, yeah, we were really happy you came, but that's it, because we do Bach, not Def Leppard.
Sure. I love your wife already.
Right. And what happened? And she wore like leather pants and like a Def Leppard shirt. And like she was gonna go, but she was gonna do it her way and get kicked out. And they loved her. And they were like, you are a breath of fresh air. We had a new kind of music we've never heard. Please, will you both join the music club? And you could see in her face, it's like, it did not go the way she expected. But she also fell in love with them too. And the incredible energy and the stories and things that we talked about. And so we were like, we're in. And then COVID happened. This was like February or March. And so the next one was like, go home, stay in place, don't meet. And they were like sending emails back and forth saying, music club's over. This is the end of an era, end of 36 years. We can't believe it. And I wrote back and said, do you know about Zoom?
Yeah.
And they were like, what's a Zoom? So I taught everyone how to do Zoom, and we moved Music Club to virtual, and it was like their lifeline for community because they didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And
Especially during that time.
during
So
that
important.
time. So it's like the universe somehow put me in that spot at that time to help them keep that music club going, and we still do it today. We're back to meeting in person, but
Sure.
it's I don't know.
It's
You can see I
incredible.
get a lot of energy and passion about it because I love like everything about it, learning and music and like what keeps people connected and going. And I think I may write a book about this. There's an incredible amount of learning that they have, a baseline of knowledge that's going to be a lifeline to everyone else who's going to be horribly lonely here very, very soon, or if they aren't already in this new world and like, trying to navigate relationships on a phone versus in person.
Mhm.
So I think they may have incredible wisdom. They may be able to save a new generation with what they know if people are willing to take it on. So yeah, that's Music Club
I'm
in a
glad I asked.
5-hour explanation. So
I'm glad. Honestly, I thought because I just read, basically one line in your bio about this, and I thought you owned a club of some sort,
oh, okay.
like an actual music venue. This is even better. What would you say? So you've been going for a little while now. You're soaking up beautiful wisdom and whatnot. Like, are there some key? Like, what are the key factors that? I guess what's the answer to the original question that you had around how has this group stuck together for 30 plus years now?
Yeah. So they keep the theme. The theme is picked by the host, so there's variety. They have a meal together, and so they've evolved over the years. But like the meal is always very simple, soup and salad or something. So it's not a huge burden on the host to try to make some. This is not a competition. It's not a let's make a 7-course meal here and make the person. As they got older and older, it became harder and harder to do this, and they made it easier and easier. Now we've even evolved. The group is now bringing. It's a potluck. So when I joined, it was the host made a dinner. It's now evolved into a potluck because now a lot of them are in their 80s. And so it's gotten even harder for them to be able to, make a full meal for everyone and prepare the table and set the do all these things that are more labor intensive. They've continued to find ways to make it, eliminate friction in having this experience. They have really taken on, I introduced them to YouTube. And so they used to listen to records and CDs when they would meet. They play Bach's Sixth Symphony or whatever. And now we're watching the New York Philharmonic on YouTube play this piece. Wow. And so they've evolved with me as to, let's not just listen, let's watch. Let's watch this famous performance of it. Or they might even ask for, one time we did something with like a harpsichord and they were like, can you play a video that shows how a harpsichord works? And so I played a video about how we understood the history. So they continue to kind of evolve and like change. So it's not rigid.
Sure. Are you getting the opposite? Not the opposite in the sense of not evolving, but that on your side where you found yourself appreciating maybe just playing a record and just the sound of it, right? Like kind of the opposite spectrum of like that's what they're used to, and you brought them into video world. So I find like we're going through that as well, and I find, at least for myself, it's nice to just really connect with whatever the topic is in a different way.
I think for you and I, that is true. For them, they're listening to that music all the time on their own.
Of course.
And so them coming together in this capacity is to share that music. So everyone gets to pick their own songs and they get a certain time limit and they pick whatever songs they think fits the prompt.
Okay.
Sometimes the prompt is very narrow. It's 17th century European composers. And like, there's only so many places to go with that. And sometimes it's like I said, pick an instrument, any music that represents an instrument you wish you would have learned. That's huge. You could have Neil Diamond in there and you could have Bach and you could have, Run DMC. I mean, you could have anything you want. So that allows for a lot of creativity. And so everyone respects and listens to the stories. They bring sometimes they print outs of things, the history, and so people can read about it. And so it's a place of learning, right?
Yeah.
And so I just sort of found that the answer was keep it simple. They rotate. They are open and learning and listening, and so they're helping out. And so it's just like, and of course, they're not talking about religion or politics or like the other things too. Right? This is about the music, and that kind of stays encapsulated at some level.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a break from reality at some point, but to just really enjoy something and enjoy people for a set period of time.
I love it. Well, I know I'm biased to recording things via audio, but I feel I mean, you probably have already thought about this, but given many of the members are in or approaching their 80s, I feel like you've got to record, some one-to-one conversations or something to do with the group to just preserve that wisdom and be able to pass it over in some capacity. I mean, I think it'd be such a beautiful thing.
I've struggled with this because I've thought, there's going to be this moment where maybe I'm going to write about it. And I also don't want to like go and shove a camera in their face.
Of course.
With this, I don't know, underlying thing of like, well, you might be dead before I am, so I want to capture this. And it sort of feels like, am I, I don't know. I've been fighting with this, like at what point am I doing a service to them and helping and documenting this? And at what point am I being selfish? And maybe I should just stick to enjoying the music club and remembering it however I remember it.
Of course.
I've been wrestling with this a little bit.
Well, I feel like there's always a balance because definitely in our culture, let's say North American culture, we've really lost the wisdom transfer for the most part, right? If you think of a lot of other cultures, it's just baked in and stuff is, lessons and stories are passed down for, hundreds of years. And, I feel like we just don't value that as much, or somehow we've broken away from that. So like any time there's moments like this, of course, you've got, I think you have to respect the people, and it's got to be presented in a way that resonates and so forth. But there's just such beauty in connecting with Chip Conley calls people like this modern elders, right? Like they're not checked out of life and done with life. They're very much here and vital, but maybe they've retired. They're not doing the regular kind of 9 to 5 or whatever it is, but they have so much beautiful knowledge to share and pass down. So anyway,
well, this group of people are busier socially than any of my.
Of course, right? I love it. It's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for that. That was, I definitely took you down on a tangent, but it was inspiring. I mean, it's making me think of different clubs or different avenues, I guess, too. Because what I hear is it's also, I mean, it's about being present and about being around people, but I think you're also indirectly training your mind to see and experience probably variations of, in this case, music that you may have not come to yourself, right? Which can be applied in so many different areas in business as well, especially the topic of this series around change and how do we prepare our minds for change that we don't even know is coming. We just know there's a bunch happening and more of that to come, but we can't even predict what that may be. And I think the more we're around situations where like, oh, that's not part of my norm, we just slowly start to build the mental muscles, just like in the physical world. Like you stay ready, So what are your thoughts? I mean, you work with a lot of teams and travel around the world and have experienced different groups and obviously work with leaders and so forth. What's the pulse that you're getting out there right now when it comes to technology and change and evolution and innovation and all of that? Like, where are the minds at in that perspective?
Well, if we look at, we can probably look at like the innovators curve, right? We have like people who are willing to be early adopters. We have people willing to be pioneers and willing to take on new things. So we certainly have a really good group of people that are sitting in that area, whether they are the futurists or they are the people creating the technologies and everything that's happening. Then we have the next group of people that are the ones who kind of take it on, and then you might, really start to digest and work through all of that. And then you have like, it gets to mainstream. So if we want to use like AI, for example,
Yeah.
ChatGPT has finally moved into mainstream. Where, when I was going to conferences and I asked people who had used ChatGPT, when it started off, there'd be 8 hands, in a room of, 1,000 people that I'm doing a speech for. And that very quickly changed to 80 to 800, in a short period of time, to where now it's just about everybody. But if you look at the rest of what's happening and the other sort of technologies and things with AI, the numbers are still quite low. So there are parts of this AI change that we're having where there are parts that have become into the mainstream. Now, most people aren't using Perplexity, most people aren't using Claude, and most people aren't using some of these other tools. Like I think ChatGPT is sort of the one in the mainstream right now.
Yeah.
And everyone's fighting for all of that. And at some point, it then goes into the generally accepted knowledge of people. The problem is that if we look at the cycles of innovation, way back when, like our great grandparents, they went from like steam power to maybe like water, like, dams and things like that. They may have gone, there was a very, like in their lifetime, one kind of change. Maybe they went from, like steam to, then we had, cars, we had petrol and things like that. And that was a big change, but like that happened in one lifetime.
Yeah.
You got to digest that whole change during your whole life. You were riding horses and then suddenly there were cars. And maybe by the end, if you started at the very beginning of that, by the end of your life, you're riding in a car, or you own a car. And like that's 60 years, 70 years, 80 years. The problem we have right now is that the cycles of change have been 15 years, 10 years. They may be going to 5-year cycles. They could maybe in our lifetime or our children's lifetime be 1-year cycles. And there isn't the time for people to digest, to become early adopters, then for it to go mainstream and to become a part of what's happening in society in a way that makes sense. And we've seen from a sociological standpoint, the resistance at times when change happens too quickly, that people get too freaked out and they become, they take on some sort of ism, a racism, a sexism, or whatever. One of these isms to suddenly fight against all of this change that they don't want. Right? There's a very large group of people who vote and have a big say, saying, "Slow down! I don't want all of this change." And that's one of the challenges we have right now. We're seeing that people are frustrated by change, don't want the change, don't see the need for the change, and we'll go down kicking and screaming. And what will we do about it? Governments around the world will probably figure this out. I don't really have a great hope that America will figure it out quickly. But, can we quickly shift how people in society function if suddenly these jobs aren't needed anymore because AI and technology could do it for? So these are all really, really big questions that we don't get a lifetime to figure out.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I think I have a slide where it just shows, I think it's something to the effect of, Netflix took 3.5 years to reach 1 million people, and GPT was 5 days. Just kind of proves your point of, it's so fast and in levels that we're just not equipped, I think, mentally to handle, because we're already pretty shattered. Or I mean, you see it with mental health stats and so forth. I mean, the vast majority of the population is not doing very well, from mental clutter and just mental health and so forth. I'm curious, Chris, if you were to go to your group, calling on those beautiful humans in the music club, and had to ask them about, change and innovation and so forth, what would you ask them? Like, what kind of guidance would you ask from them?
And my first reaction is maybe I wouldn't ask them for advice on how to deal with the change that we're dealing with now. I'm not sure if they have the perspective, because again, the amount of change, they've had a lot of change. I mean, my example earlier about teaching them how to use Zoom was a big deal. And this particular group is a first adopters group. They are This is not a group of people. If they didn't like change, if they were, not lifelong learners, they're not in this club. So they represent a very distinct group of people. But certainly I might ask them, how they got others around them to change.
Yeah,
I think
it's a good
that's the
question.
wisdom for them, right? They already changed. They're already there. But how do they get their friends and family? How do they drag them along kicking and screaming into the 21st century? I think that might be the wisdom. Certainly, I've talked about this in my books about how, from a change management standpoint, how do we get change? And one of the things that I learned in my companies was that I needed to get the people who are really excited about the change, who really thought this was a good idea. So, if I owned a company today, if there was like 10 people who were like, Chat GPT is the most amazing thing in the world, and I had a couple hundred employees that were like, I don't know, this is scary. I don't want to do this. I don't want to try it. I could go and like do education and conferences and push and shove. But what I found was I needed those 10 people to go have lunch with those 100. I needed them just to go and talk and just hear their fears and let them, the excited people who didn't hold authority and power over them, just to have a conversation with them to get them more comfortable. That had way more value and momentum than me as their boss saying, but you really should do this. This is going to be great. Because they were like, I don't know, boss. You're just trying to get rid of me, or do you want to just try to save more money? Or what's good for you may not be good for me. But if I had a fellow employee who's really excited about it, could show them this was a good thing. That was gold.
Yeah. I think what comes to mind, because I'm trying to think of, well, I mean, this is something that would work right now. I'm trying to think of the container environment that would be really conducive. Like, because to me, it's that it's, you have to create a safe, probably confidential, and just welcoming space for people on different ends of the spectrum to come together and just talk as humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Share concerns, share excitement, and so forth. But then, get to a common understanding of, okay, well, maybe this, it with a perspective shift or some other information data, maybe this isn't that bad actually. And
Right.
we know from history as well, even though it, the rate of change is completely different. We also do know that in, moving from radio to TV, there was uproar. There's countless examples of resisting change, right? And we've been through cycles like this. I think now it's just the unknown variable is how to handle for speed of change.
Yeah, and because it keeps happening quicker and quicker, how will society split? Could this be the new wealth gap? Could this be the new, thing that for the haves and have-nots, of people that are willing to change, maybe willing to walk around with the Apple thing on your face all day long, and like your whole new reality is that it's like Ready Player One versus, everyone else who's walking, and so will like those groups totally separate. Could you have those people living in high-rise buildings above the clouds like we see in the futurist movies, and everyone else living on the ground? Like, so I don't know the answer to that question, but it does feel like that is going to continue to be a divide.
Sure.
If we look at great fiction and science fiction and all of that, it could be a scary place for us to go, where if they have-nots, if those people who are not willing to change or understand that are so big, it's not half of the group, it's 90% of the group, then what happens? And so, it's an interesting thing for us to think about. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think to your point, if we continue to try to have humanity and conversations with those people in our lives who we can impact, that's the most important and probably the most significant thing we can do right now.
So with all that said, from your perspective, and again, having access and having worked with a lot of different teams and working on, trends that are, cutting edge and coming and so forth, for you personally, what are some of the things that you do, whether they're practices, rituals, routines, exercises, whatever you want to call them, that allow your mind to rest? And, coming full circle to how you mentioned you have this ability to spot out, one or two, like those are the things. Usually when I speak to people like that, it's because there's a certain level of clarity in their mind that the noise can be pushed out or processed or released. So I'm curious, just with everything we're talking about, because it can be not can be, it is overwhelming for a lot of people to even ask those big questions, then anxiety loops start to fire up and so forth. So what works for you? Like, what are some of your non-negotiable practices or routines and rituals?
So my brain is a noisy hot mess.
Okay.
As an adult, I realized my kids all had ADD, and I realized when they got diagnosed, and I'm looking at this diagnosis form, I'm like, oh,
Yeah, what about me here?
oh, okay. Wow, this is like explains me to a T. Okay, wow. And so it really helped in life to kind of like start to get tools and be able to do some of that. Um, I notice that I get great ideas and clarity when I am doing a single focused thing. And so I try to do those things as much as I can. So that could be in the shower.
Sure.
I can't do anything. I can't take calls. I can't watch TV. I can't do anything else. I'm in the shower. That's it. And so I have also built in other routines in my life. I like to do cold plunge and a sauna. Can't do anything else except those things when I'm doing those things. If I go for a walk, I can get a little distracted, but I'm pretty, go for a hike, go for a walk, pretty focused on what I'm doing in that regard. And so it helped. Those were the times when all that noise in my brain will settle down and get clarity on something.
Yeah.
I'm also I've been very fortunate that I'm a pretty good sleeper.
Yeah.
And
Sleep's key.
and sleep is really key for being creative and being able to work through ideas. So one of the things that I will do is I will think about what are the things that I'm trying to figure out. I will be very intentional and think about those things. Now, for some people, this doesn't work because they start to get anxiety and they can't stop thinking about it. But I think it'd be really great if I had an answer to this question for my client. I work with some companies as a consultant. I'm like, they're really worried about this thing. I wonder if I could come up with something about that. And I just leave that there in my brain and I go to bed. And it amazes me how my brain works on that. But I was intentional about putting that prompt. I'm almost like my own ChatGPT. I gave myself the prompt before I went to bed, and my brain worked on it. I woke up in the morning, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I go, oh, what about this? Write that down. And it's amazing how my brain will do that work for me while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Right. And so it's being intentional. And a lot of people, I'm also a terrible procrastinator. And that drives everyone in my life nuts, but it also puts pressure. It gives me the time to think about it and the time to let my brain catch up and be exposed to new ideas and to get lucky that I might see something or read something or be inspired by something that then triggers the next good idea and the next bit of clarity. And so I'm not rushing to an answer.
Yeah.
I know so many people that rush to, I need an answer now. What's the answer I can find now? And you know what? It's a stupid, crappy answer. It's not the right one. It's just the one you can get to the quickest. And I'm not willing to do that. I will procrastinate. Now, the deadlines are good for me because I'll procrastinate forever. But if you're like, hey, next week I need an answer to this, you're going to get a lot better answer out of me than you're like, hey, tomorrow I need an answer.
Sure.
So.
Okay. So stillness. Some level of stillness. I mean, it might be your mind might still be spinning, but there's an element of some of the things that you shared is just single tasking and letting the mind breathe a little bit, and surprise things start to come through because they are there. I mean, I do believe we hold the answers to the vast majority of the questions that we have. We just need to quiet down the hamster up top and let those things surface.
It's accepting that I live in a hurricane and I cannot stop the hurricane, but every once in a while I can dip into the eye of the storm and there's calmness and let solutions and things come in. But then I think far too often people are trying to stop the hurricane. They're trying to make their life calm all the time. And I know very few people who are good at that or make that
Yeah.
happen. And if you think about people who can do that? Well, maybe like Buddhist monks or something but like they literally live away from all of the chaos and like they're meditating all day long. They're literally living in that eye for most of their time. And that's not the reality for most of us.
Yeah. I
So
I just wrote that down. I love that visual, and I think just being real with ourselves, right? Like that whole idea where you said, accepting that you live in a hurricane, and I think I would extend that, accepting that like we live essentially in a hurricane, but that it's okay and that we can intentionally dip into the eye, and there are moments, and if we choose to prioritize those moments, I think that's, if I had to put a prediction out there, when you look at mental health stats, and of course this is generalizing, but the vast majority of people are just swirling around constantly nonstop, right? There are like those moments aren't there, then it gets to the point where it's you can't manage anymore. And it's not surprising. I mean, there's a lot going on. But just even hearing like that perspective shift is, at least for me, feels a little bit lighter. Like, okay, it's what it is, and it's okay. And it's like you're the like firmly rooted old oak tree that, sure, you might be pushed around and whatnot, but you're still going to stay planted for the most part. Powerful.
I was fortunate for years to be in this CEO group and it was some of the top people in Southern California in the Orange County LA area, companies, $2 billion market caps and best angel investor ever on record. I mean, there's some people where I felt like I was like, why did you let me in the room? Like these
Sure.
people were the top of the top. And it often came up where there would be this level of guilt about how much they worked and how much they were gone. And some of those, I forget the term you used, which I loved. So this was it, sage mentors, but some of the older
Like almost like wisdom keepers in a way.
wisdom keeper, right? Some of the older,
Modern elders.
modern elders. Thank you.
Chip
That was the
Conley's
great term. Modern elders.
Yeah.
Some of the modern elders in our group would remind some of the newer people or younger people in our group that because they would be essentially guilty about how much time they were gone from their kids or their families because they're running these gigantic companies. And the modern elders would tell them, listen, when I went through this, and I've now asked my kids as adults about their perspectives on this, he's like, they didn't notice that I was gone. What they remember is that I coached their baseball team. What they remembered is I showed up. So it was quality time, not quantity time.
Yeah.
So there was one guy who said for 10 years, I was never home Monday through Friday. I got home Friday night. I was home Saturday and Sunday. I left Monday morning for 10 years. That was my life. But I coached their sports teams on the weekend.
Yeah. Well,
and
it it makes me think, because we always have, we're fast to pass judgment in situations like that. But, and obviously I don't know who the person is, but you could project and think, well, those 2 days might have been more present than the person that, is spending 7 days and just like in and out, but on their phone and not focused, like not actually there. Right. Like that's the quality aspect. It's a good reminder, really good reminder.
Yeah. And that's how we're going to probably shift and deal with everything else we talked about so far today, is to really make sure we're having those quality moments with people that we care about, with people that need to hear these things, and go deep. And it's not commenting and liking on a Facebook post. It's getting together with them and having a real conversation. And that's going to mean a lot more.
Yeah. Well, full circle to the music group. I'm glad we had that discussion because it seems to have kind of wrapped all the way around to, there's some really valuable lessons to just sitting down with wonderful people and having human conversation and uninterrupted time. And, you inject whatever the topic that you want to speak about or learn about, but the container, or what makes it so powerful, is taking that time in a quality manner, right? And having equally energize the people around you that are sharing those interests. Love
Yeah.
it. Love
Yeah.
it. Chris, is there anything else that, just knowing the topic and again dovetailing, I know some of the topics you speak about and so forth. I think there's definitely overlap with culture and technology and so forth. But are there any kind of final messages you would love to get across based on what you're feeling and experiencing out there and what you do day in, day out?
Yeah. I always like to remind people that what you focus on grows.
Yeah.
So whatever it is you are focusing on, and you really need to go back and do inventory in your life and your work and your relationships, because if what you're focused on is how this person wronged me, or that they didn't call me, or that they missed this thing, or right, as opposed to when we get to have a good experience together, or when they showed up for me in a way that I needed them to, or whatever it is. If we focus on the negative things, you're only going to get more negative in your life. It's only going to
Yeah.
grow. And maybe there's a relationship you wish was better, and then maybe the focus is to go focus on the other relationships that are going well and let that one figure itself out. But I find that so many people want good experiences, they want good relationships, they want good employees, they want good bosses and managers and all this stuff. And yet when you talk to them, they're focusing on all the negative stuff constantly.
Yeah.
And so it's only the only thing you can do. I mean, if you're focused on the fire and you keep putting wood on the fire, it keeps getting hotter, and so you have to think about what you want to focus on. And as the speed of change is happening faster and faster, and these cycles are happening, we have to really be focusing on what's working for us and what's good, and realize that the rest of it we have probably no control over. I mean, most of us have we are not high up in the government. We're not we're not the CEO of a Fortune, 100 company. Like for most of us, we have little impact on the rest of it, or no impact on it. And we can only impact on what we focus on.
Yeah. Well, it's again coming, navigating back to the eye of the storm, essentially using whatever tools and practices that you have that work for you and at your disposal to, I think first and foremost, give ourselves the opportunity to check in and even just realize that, well, I want to feel and I want to show up in this way, but if I'm honest with myself and look at how I'm speaking and what I'm focusing on, it's actually the opposite, right? And to your point, you're just fueling the fire. So let's just take some inventory, check in with ourselves, cut the fuel source, and enjoy with the unknown and the uncertainty that's about to come. I mean, there's a lot of beauty in all of this, and frankly, if you again think perspective of history, even though it's changing faster. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful innovation out there that at one point was probably terrifying, and it's just, I think it's just part of the cycle. But I don't know. I feel like we deserve as humans or to ourselves to feel good more days than not. And there are many ways to do that if we pull ourselves out of that storm every now and then.
Yeah. And the other thing to remember is that probably every answer you need when it comes to a spiritual, philosophical, whatever it is you need to know, it's already been figured out.
Yeah.
There is nothing new is coming.
Yeah.
Humans have been around long enough that there is the right thing for you. You want to go look at Eastern philosophy, you want to go to, Western religion, whatever it is, it fits your thing. It's already figured out. Yeah. So you just need to go find your people. You need to go find your thing. It's there. You don't have to wait. There's not I don't think there's going to be some new awakening of some new way of our brains as human. We already know how to act as humans. We already have the blueprints and the communities built in for that.
Yeah.
All we have to do is get ourselves on the straight and narrow from that perspective, and then start dealing with all the other, hopefully you view it as cool stuff that's coming, because Star Trek and Star Wars and the Jetsons and all this stuff is coming for you. It's coming now. We're probably going to have, robots cleaning our house,
Yeah.
We're probably going to be living in the sky. We're probably going to have flying cars. We're probably, all these things are going to really be happening. What I'm really excited about is the whole version of Star Trek that could be for real, which is there's this computer I can really talk to, and like figure stuff out and like, is integrated into your life in a very seamless way to make our lives better, right?
Yeah, seamless and useful. I feel like that's been the big, because a lot of the technology that we've been talking about or have been seeing advance, like I mentioned VR and AR and stuff like that, and Apple's goggles and whatnot. It always felt like, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's coming in 10 years or something like that. Whereas, AI, like at least the version that we see publicly, Chat GPT and whatnot, like I feel like it's one of the first times where like, oh, this is coming, and then it was there. In a way, like I feel like that's the different piece that now people are really, again, outside of the people that are actually working on this technology, because I know it's been in development for quite some time, but mainstream, we're seeing and feeling the speed now, right? So to your point, like, let's just strap in, let's enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
It can be like that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Chris, this was fun. We'll have to get you back on, and I feel like we could jam about a lot of different topics. Your energy is awesome, good stories, and I'm not surprised that you're booked around the world on beautiful stages, inspiring other humans and getting people to shift and move. So, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on. It was a lot of fun to talk about it. And actually, we ended up talking about a lot of different things that I don't normally talk about. So this was like really fun and refreshing. A lot of times people are like, let's talk about the same thing you just did in the last 200 podcasts you were on, which is fine. But this was fun to kind of go in some different places and different directions. So kudos to you for finding a little nugget there in my bio and us kind of having a little fun with it. It was great.
I appreciate that. That lands right in the heart. Thank you. And until next time.